Hi there, I'm Bombalina. Before my scholarship interview, the one I worked years for, my sister stole my passport. And my family? They all pretended it was just a mix-up. But it wasn't the first time something like this happened. They'd sabotaged my science project in middle school, ruined my prom dress, lied, smiled, and called it love. What kind of family does that and still expects your silence? I had a secret backup plan, but what I didn't expect was what came after. Want to know what happens when the quiet one finally speaks? Dinner was halfway done when I said it out loud. I made it to the final round for the International Policy Fellowship. They're flying me to Chicago next week for the interview. The words felt steady when they left my mouth. I'd rehearsed them enough, but the moment they hit the table, the air thickened like soup left too long on the stove. Dad didn't even look up from the newspaper, just nodded vaguely and muttered, "That's nice, honey," like I'd said something about the weather. Mom paused, fork midair, then smiled. Not the proud kind, more like the one she used when I brought up things too big for someone like me. "Bambi, sweetie, don't set yourself up for disappointment again, okay?" Carlene leaned back in her chair, arms folded. Her eyes sparkled, not with joy. "You? Representing America abroad?" she snorted. "You still forget the laundry in the washer. Better pray the embassy doesn't find your wet socks." The table erupted in laughter. Even Uncle Roy, who barely knew what year it was, chuckled from the end seat. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, gripping my napkin beneath the table until the corner tore off in my palm. No one noticed. That's how it had always been. I was the quiet one. The one they thought was a little strange for not watching reality TV, for reading policy papers at the kitchen counter, for quitting a decent payroll job to chase a dream. But this was different. This wasn't just a lack of support. It was mockery. Full on, round the table, go back to your lane mockery. Carlene raised her glass. "To dreams that die in airport security." And they all clinked their glasses together, smiling like it was some harmless joke. After the dishes were cleared, I did what I always did. I helped wash, dried the plates, loaded the dishwasher while everyone else returned to their shows. But inside something cracked. The next morning, I had a tutoring shift at the public library, part of a small volunteer program for adults studying for their GEDs. It was the only place I felt useful, respected. Mr. Holcomb was one of the retired teachers who stopped by sometimes. He'd been a mentor when I was in high school, a man of few words, but sharp as ever. That day as I was packing up, he pulled me aside near the stacks. "I heard about the fellowship," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. Then he hesitated, glanced over his shoulder. "You asked me to write a recommendation letter back in January. I sent it in through their system, as you requested." I nodded. "I got confirmation they received something." He frowned. "A week later I got another email, said it was from you, asking me to update the name on the letter, to Carlene's." I blinked. "I thought it was strange," he continued, "but the email looked real. Had your old signature and all." I didn't say a word, just nodded slowly and whispered, "Thank you for telling me." He gave my arm a gentle squeeze and walked away. I didn't cry. Not then. Not even when I got home and found Carlene lounging in the living room, flipping through her phone like she hadn't just stolen a piece of my future. Instead, I went upstairs, closed my door, sat on the edge of my old twin bed, surrounded by forgotten high school medals and participation certificates no one had framed. Then I stood and stared at myself in the mirror. Really stared. They never saw me. Not really. Not when I stayed late at work to fund my community college. Not when I won the essay competition in sophomore year and paid my own way to DC. Not when I cooked, cleaned, filled in the blanks where my sister fell short. All they saw was what I made easier for them. And now, I wasn't even worth a seat at the table. Only the punchline. I knelt down and pulled out the shoebox from under my bed. It was labeled Plan B in red marker. Inside, a second copy of my birth certificate, a scan of my ID, a backup passport application already submitted, a prepaid debit card. I wasn't stupid. I'd learned years ago that in this family, you had to have an exit strategy. Just as I was closing the box, I heard Mom calling from downstairs. Bambi, you okay up there? I cleared my throat. Fine. Your sister says you're upset. Of course she did. I lay back against the pillow, arms crossed behind my head. The ceiling fan spun slowly, and the hum of the house settled into the silence I knew too well. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. Not yet. Some storms require silence before the strike. That night, just as I was pulling my blanket over me, I found something tucked beneath my pillow. A folded note. The handwriting looked familiar, soft curves like Mom's, but it wasn't. It was left under my pillow like a bedtime blessing. The paper was carefully folded into thirds. I unfolded it slowly, the edges crisp, like it had just been printed or, worse, rehearsed. The ink was a smooth blue, the curves neat and rounded like my mother's. But something about the spacing of the letters, the exaggerated curls in the G, gave it away. Sometimes God closes doors for a reason, it read. You don't have to force everyone open. Love, Mom. Except it wasn't her. I'd seen her real handwriting for years. Grocery lists stuck to the fridge, reminders on napkins, birthday cards. This one felt like a performance. Too measured, too perfect. I pulled out the last birthday card she gave me, tucked in the bottom drawer, under some old receipts. The difference was clear. This note was an imitation, and a sloppy one at that. Someone wanted me to feel comforted, quieted, disarmed. It didn't take a genius to guess who. 3 days passed. Sunday rolled around like it always did. Church in the morning, lunch at home right after. Routine, routine, routine. That's how they liked it. Familiarity as a shield against accountability. The house smelled like roast and gravy when we walked in. I helped Mom set the table, while Carlene flipped through hymns on her phone, humming softly like a woman baptized in virtue. Lunch began with grace. Carlene was chosen to lead it. Of course she was. And her voice floated across the room with sugary elegance. We pray for humility, for guidance, for Bambolina's restless heart, that it may find peace in God's timing. Peace in God's timing. A convenient cloak for manipulation. They all echoed Amen. I didn't. As the plates passed and conversation shifted to the service, Dad chuckled. That pastor sure knows how to wake people up. I nearly dropped my wallet when he raised his voice. Carlene grinned. You weren't the only one. They laughed. Small, harmless talk. Then I tried. I emailed the fellowship committee yesterday. They confirmed my slot in the interview schedule, next Wednesday. Silence. Mom glanced at me, then back to her plate. You're always so stressed about these things. Maybe try trusting a little more. Dad muttered. Let's not make this another one of your dinner speeches, Bambi. We're just trying to eat. Carlene tilted her head. We love you, Bambi. You know that. But you really do tend to spiral. Remember that summer you swore someone at the testing center had lost your scores on purpose? She smiled like she was comforting me. Everyone chuckled softly. I kept my fork down. It wasn't just the laughter. It was the choreography of it all, like a scene rehearsed a dozen times until everyone had their cue. You always overthink. You stress too much. Maybe you imagined it. A gentle piling on, enough to make anyone doubt their own footing. I didn't argue. I smiled politely, took a sip of water, excused myself before dessert. Back upstairs, I went straight to my drawer and laid the fake note beside the birthday card. I studied them again. The loops, the spacing, the way the lowercase e tilted just slightly in Mom's real writing, but stood upright in the note. I tucked them both into a folder. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them. Yet. I spent the next couple of hours pacing my room, then cleaning out files on my laptop, anything to keep my hands moving. When I went downstairs to grab tea, Carlene was already in the kitchen, pouring hers. She turned slightly when she heard me, her tone sweet as maple syrup. Mom says you didn't eat dessert. Everything okay? Just a headache, I replied, reaching past her for the honey. She nodded slowly, not breaking eye contact. Hope it's not stress. You know how you get. I didn't answer. Instead, I looked past her, toward the family computer in the corner of the room. It had been running slower lately. Certain documents didn't open like they used to. My flash drive had gone missing from the drawer last week. Small things. But now, they were starting to connect. She moved past me, cup in hand, humming the same hymn from lunch. As I stirred my tea, I glanced back at the login screen on the desktop. Somebody had logged in 2 nights ago under my profile. I hadn't. So who did? I stood there for a moment longer, cup warm in my hand, steam rising. No confrontation, not yet. But I saw it all now. The patterns, the fingerprints. They were trying to convince me I was imagining it, and for a long time I had. Not anymore. I didn't sleep much after that. The light from my desk lamp cast long shadows across the carpet, and I stayed at the edge of my bed, staring at the folder with the forged note tucked safely inside. My tea had gone cold hours ago, untouched on the nightstand. I could still feel its warmth in my hands, like a memory that hadn't cooled yet. I sat down, opened the drawer where I kept old cards, and compared the signature again. No doubt it was fake. And it wasn't just the handwriting. It was the tone. That kind of rehearsed God's plan voice I'd heard 1,000 times when someone wanted to soften a blow they were too cowardly to deliver honestly. The drawer stuck for a second as I pulled it open all the way. Behind the cards and papers, I found the worn shoebox I hadn't opened in years, the one I labeled 7th grade solar system. I ran my hand over the top, hesitating, but my fingers found the lid anyway. Inside were scattered pieces of foam balls, toothpicks, little labels I'd written with a shaky Sharpie when I was 12. Pluto's name was still smudged, probably from when I'd cried holding it. I built that model over 4 weekends, stayed up on school nights painting, stringing the orbits, making Saturn's rings from fishing line. The night before the science fair, I came downstairs to check on it, and the whole thing was soaked in glue. Not knocked over, not broken by accident, just drowned. I remember Mom rushing in saying, "Oh no, did that shelf collapse?" She didn't look at me. Didn't notice the open glue bottle tipped over neatly on the counter? Or maybe she did and said nothing. I'd seen Carlene in the garage earlier that evening. She said she was grabbing laundry. I didn't ask questions. I didn't scream. I just stayed up all night trying to fix what was left. The next morning, I stood in front of my project at the fair like it hadn't been a total disaster, pretending I was just clumsy with adhesives. That was the first time I knew I couldn't rely on my family for protection. But it wasn't the last. I got up, walked across the room, and turned off the light. The room darkened, but the thoughts didn't. They just changed shape. Memories I hadn't invited started rolling in. Junior year, prom season. I was 17. I'd saved for that dress for months. Tutoring after school, skipping every iced coffee, eating crackers for lunch more days than I'd admit. It was a deep burgundy velvet, fitted just right, with lace around the sleeves. I kept it in a garment bag in the back of my closet. The night before prom, I unzipped the bag and nearly dropped to the floor. The bottom hem was streaked with bleach. Not spilled, poured, even, white lines across the fabric like someone had measured it. I stood frozen for a full minute. I don't know why I looked around the room like the culprit would be standing there with the bottle. I showed Mom. She winced. "Oh, honey, the laundry probably got mixed up. You left it too close to the washer." Funny, because Carlene's dress was in the same load, not a drop on hers. In fact, it looked freshly steamed. I didn't say anything. That night I put on a backup dress, not even mine, just something from a friend's closet. I showed up late and told everyone I decided not to go all out. A lie I didn't even realize I'd rehearsed until years later. I walked back to my desk, pulled open the second drawer, and found my old journal. Most pages were childish rambling, but one entry caught my eye. "I think maybe I make things harder for them. I don't mean to." That line hit me harder than I expected. A kid trying to shrink herself down so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. Trying to believe it was her fault for taking up too much space. I tore that page out and tossed it in the trash. "No," I whispered. "You were surviving." I opened my tablet, created a new document, and typed the header. Timeline, sabotage. I listed everything I remembered. Dates, incidents, patterns. Not because I planned to show anyone, not yet, but because I needed to stop gaslighting myself. This wasn't paranoia. This was a pattern. And I was done pretending it wasn't real. I didn't get up with an alarm. My body woke me before the sun reached the slats of the blinds. It was that kind of morning, sharp in the lungs, dry in the mouth, the kind that drags you upright before the house even creaks to life. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the heater kick on. The silence in the hallway was too still, too careful, like the house was trying not to wake itself up. I grabbed my file folder, the one with my scholarship packet, and flipped through it one more time. Everything looked in order: application copies, printed emails, photocopies of IDs, all except for one thing. I needed to reprint my passport page for the packet I was assembling to bring to the interview in Chicago. The deadline was closing in, and I didn't want to risk grainy scans. I was planning to head to the print shop around 10. That meant retrieving the original from the home safe, just for a clean copy. No big deal. But even as I walked toward the home office, something in my chest itched. The safe was where Dad kept donation receipts, Carlene's tax forms, some birth certificates. We all knew the code. The same 6 digits since I was 13, 1992, Carlene's birth year. No one had changed it because, what's the point, it's just family. I turned the knob slowly, entered the code. The click sounded normal, familiar. I pulled the door open, and the folder was right there in the center, exactly where I'd left it. Same color, same clip. But when I opened it, my passport wasn't inside. Everything else was there. Forms from church, envelopes labeled 2022 giving records, even Dad's voter registration. Untouched. Pristine. Just not my passport. My stomach flipped. Not a drop, but a slow roll that settled into something cold. I went through the papers twice. Then again. Then I shook the folder upside down, like something would fall out and explain it. Nothing did. I stood there, hand gripping the edge of the safe door, the silence heavier than the steel itself. Only 3 of us knew the code. And I was damn sure I hadn't told anyone where I kept that folder. Still holding the empty folder, I walked out of the office, down the hallway, and into the kitchen. The clock above the sink read 8:03. Mom was still at her women's group. Dad would be at the store. Carlene's car was gone. The house was quiet. I reached for my phone and dialed the Department of State's passport office. I wasn't even sure what I'd say. Maybe just request a status update. The hold music was like a heartbeat in my ear. Steady, clinical, pretending not to mock me. Then a voice came on. "Thank you for holding. This is Anthony. How can I help?" I cleared my throat. "Hi, I need to check the status of a passport, mine. It's supposed to be current and active, but I think it might have been tampered with." I gave him my name, date of birth, last issuance year. A pause. "Miss Cloanne?" he said. "Actually, this passport was reported lost 2 weeks ago." I blinked at the stove. "Reported lost? By who?" "I'm afraid I can't give names," he said, "but the system notes it was reported by a female family member, notarized locally." I didn't respond. I could hear my own breath through the speaker. "Is it reversible?" "You'd need to reapply or use the backup application you submitted in March." I sat down. I never told anyone about that March reapplication. It was precautionary, an instinct maybe, like I knew I'd need a plan B and didn't trust anyone enough to say it out loud. The moment I hung up, I walked back to my room, locked the door, pulled up my backup email, the one I'd set up 6 months ago, separate from everything connected to the house Wi-Fi. There it was, a delivery confirmation. A replacement passport signed for 3 days ago, by someone named Nevia. I didn't even smile. I just exhaled. I opened the drawer under my bed, pulled out the smaller safe I kept hidden under a blanket of old sweaters. Keyed in the code. Inside, untouched and safe, was the backup envelope. They had tried to cut me off at the knees. They thought I'd panic, freeze. But I wasn't the same girl who showed up to prom pretending bleach was a laundry mistake. I picked up the envelope and stared at myself in the mirror. My face wasn't furious. It wasn't even afraid. It was calculating. Let them think they've won. Let them think I'm too quiet to make noise. They don't know what silence is until it becomes strategy. I tucked the backup passport into a padded envelope, sealed it, and slid it into the false bottom of my suitcase. Quiet steps, no panic, no second guessing, just deliberate motion. I'd already lost enough time pretending things would fix themselves. Downstairs, the voices reached me before the faces did. Carlene was laughing, soft, casual, like nothing in the world could be wrong. Mom's voice drifted in next, sweetened with faux concern. Dad's low hum of approval came last, the sound of someone avoiding eye contact with the truth. I descended the stairs one at a time, not slowly, but carefully. I didn't want to rush. I wanted them to see me coming. The living room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and coffee. Mom was perched on the edge of the couch. Carlene sprawled across the other end with her phone in hand. Dad sat in his recliner, eyes on a daily devotional, pretending to be absorbed by the same paragraph he'd read for years. I didn't sit. I stood across from them like I was about to give a presentation no one had asked for. Someone reported my passport as lost, to the federal database, officially. No reaction, no blinking, just stillness, like a painting. Anyone want to own that? Carlene didn't look up. That's paranoid. Why would we do that? Dad turned a page without reading it. Mom shifted slightly, eyes soft but detached. You're under a lot of stress, sweetheart. You've always been dramatic when deadlines approach. They all performed confusion with practiced ease, like it was muscle memory. I wasn't even angry in that moment, just numb. Carlene added, You remember freshman year? You thought the registrar lost your exam scores on purpose. Maybe this is like that. It was a deliberate flick of the wrist, meant to discredit without sounding cruel. They'd mastered that dance years ago. I didn't flinch. You all seem very committed to the idea that I'm unstable, I said. I'm just wondering what happens when I stop playing along. A beat of silence. Then Mom stood up and moved toward the kitchen. Let me make you some tea. I stepped into her path. Was it you? I asked. Or did you just sign what she handed you? Her eyes dropped for a second. Then she smiled, the kind of smile people offer at funerals. Sometimes God closes certain doors, she said softly, and we have to trust His will. I stared at her. And if this door was mine to walk through? Then He'll open another, she replied. You don't need this one. Your sister needs you here. She's had a hard year. It wasn't a denial, it was a reroute. Sabotage wrapped in faith. Carlene rolled her eyes. This is ridiculous, Bambi. You always make everything about you. Dad finally looked up just for a moment. Your mother's been up all night worrying. She already raised one star, Bombolina. Maybe that's enough for one family. It landed harder than any shout could have. I took a breath. Not deep, just enough to stay steady. So I was never supposed to shine. Got it. We gave you peace, Dad said, turning his gaze back to the page. You wanted noise. It was surgical, the way he said it. No emotion, just the verdict. I walked toward the doorway but stopped before leaving. I turned around. Calm. Steady. I have one shot at this, I said. If you interfere again, if any of you do, I won't be the one leaving. Mom's face froze. Carlene looked like she was ready to scoff again. I added, I won't shout, I won't fight. I'll just tell the truth. And when it lands, your little image of a perfect home won't survive it. Carlene snorted. What are you going to do, Bambi? Write a memoir? I didn't blink. No, I'll just let your lies echo without my silence to muffle them. Then I left the room. Not quickly, not dramatically. But with every step the ground underneath me felt more mine. That night, in the quiet of my room, my phone buzzed once. A message from Navia. Package secured. They never saw me. I sat on the edge of my bed, rereading Navia's message. My fingers brushed the outline of the sealed envelope hidden in the lining of my suitcase. Beneath the surface, my heart beat a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not doubt, but momentum. The house creaked as night set in, dinner dishes already done, the television humming softly in the living room where my parents sat glued to their routine. Carlene's voice echoed faintly from the hallway, probably bragging about her newest Instagram followers. No one knew what I had planned, and that was the point. Once the house quieted, I slipped into my closet, pushing aside a stack of off-season sweaters and kneeling on the wooden floorboards. My hands found the familiar loose slat, pried it open, and reached into the dark space below. The emergency backpack was still there. I pulled it out gently, like it might shatter if disturbed. Inside, every item was right where I'd packed it months ago. Backup passport, copies of recommendation letters, alternate ID, a prepaid phone with a brand new SIM, cash, and a printout of my scholarship itinerary. I checked the passport again. The seal was still intact. I let out a quiet breath. This wasn't a plan B anymore. This was the plan. My phone buzzed again, just once. Nevaeh was FaceTiming. I grabbed the prepaid and answered. Her face appeared in the dim light of her parked car, hair in a messy bun, voice low but urgent. They're watching your socials now. I saw Carlene trying to log into your old Gmail. She's using the family tablet. I told you to stop posting on your main. I haven't in days, I replied. Good, stay dark. You're too close. She leaned forward, flipping the camera to show footage from her building's front cam, time-stamped, clear. The package had been delivered hours earlier. No one followed her. No one even knew she'd driven out this way. They're slipping, B, she said. Desperate always makes people dumb. I'm past asking permission to exist, I told her. Nevaeh smiled. There's the girl I remember. You got this. She hung up before I could thank her. I sat still for a moment, the prepaid resting in my lap, my reflection flickering across the black screen. Then I reached for my tablet and opened the encrypted cloud folder I'd created last winter. Inside was the video. I hit play. Carlene, caught on camera, clear as daylight, in my room last Tuesday night. Rummaging through drawers like she had every right. Her hair was tied back, she looked calm, calculated. She wasn't even in a rush. The footage cut to her walking into the home office with something in hand. Timestamp, 9:12 p.m., exactly 48 hours before the passport was reported missing. I copied the video into a separate labeled drive. It was subtle, no dramatics. But as I watched her scroll through my files, pull open folders, snoop like it was second nature, I felt the last remnants of guilt dissolve from my spine. I wasn't paranoid. I was targeted, and I had proof. I closed the folder, slipped the USB into the side pocket of the backpack, and zipped everything tight. They thought silence meant surrender. They never realized silence could also be strategy sharpening its teeth. My fingers traced the edge of the bag. I wasn't just walking out with a plan. I was walking out with a record. The house was still quiet. I heard the front door lock click from the hallway, Mom's voice asking if Carlene had fed the dog, and Dad complaining about reruns. They had no idea what had already shifted, what I'd already reclaimed. I turned off the light, slipped beneath my blanket, and lay still. Tomorrow wouldn't be an escape, it would be a return to myself. I woke before the sun broke the horizon. My room was still wrapped in a soft hush, but my mind was already sprinting. I reached for the prepaid phone on my nightstand. 3 missed texts from Nevaeh. Nevaeh, you need to see this, it's spreading fast. I clicked the first link. There it was, Carlene's Instagram story, shining bright in bold white text over a filtered family photo from last year's 4th of July. So proud of my little sister for choosing rest over pressure. Mental health matters. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to stop. The next frame showed an old picture of me, mid-laugh, captioned, "We support you, Bambi, always." I sat up slowly, my jaw tightening. The audacity. There were already dozens of comments underneath the post. People writing things like, "So brave of her to step back," or "Family first, always." Some even praised Carlene for supporting me through burnout. This wasn't support. This was a soft kill. I scrolled through Nevaeh's other messages, screenshots of Carlene replying to strangers, playing the role of the doting sister. One reply read, "It's been a hard few months for her. We're just grateful she's taking time to heal." I felt like I was watching someone sculpt a wax version of me, smiling, nodding, stepping aside, gracefully defeated. And all of it was a lie. 36 hours before my interview, and the narrative was already being rewritten. I threw off the blanket and opened my laptop. There was an email from the scholarship committee. Subject: Follow-up, Interview Withdrawal. I held my breath and opened it. Dear Bambolina, we've received confirmation that you've chosen to withdraw from the final interview scheduled in Atlanta. As we understand the decision came from your primary email account, we'd appreciate a quick confirmation. We're here if you need to talk. I blinked twice, checked the headers. The sender was a cloned version of my Gmail, off by one letter, identical at a glance. My fingers flew over the keys. I responded with urgency and precision, attaching a PDF of my travel confirmation, scanned copies of my backup passport, and a short, assertive note. That message was not sent by me. I'm attending the interview. Please see attached proof. And this? I linked the cloud folder. Inside, I placed the video footage of Carleen entering my room, the time-stamped activity logs, and the metadata Nevia had extracted overnight. Less than 2 minutes after I hit send, my phone rang. The coordinator. "Bambolina?" she asked, her tone unsure. "Yes, I didn't send that email. Someone's trying to erase me." A pause, then her voice softened. "We were confused. I'm glad you reached out. Just tell me this. Are you coming?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, and when I do, I'd like to speak to the panel. Directly." I could hear the weight in her silence. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was belief. "Understood. We'll see you soon." I exhaled slowly as I hung up. Then I turned back to the screen, where Nevia had sent another message. "Nevia. We pulled the metadata. That email came from the family laptop. Same IP as your house. Same timestamp you saw her in the video." I stared at the blinking cursor in our chat thread and typed back. "They knew how to write my voice, but they forgot I had receipts." Nevia responded with a voice note this time. "She's trying to win sympathy, but you've got truth. When this hits, you won't just survive it. You'll redefine the whole thing." I closed the laptop and reached for the small black notebook where I'd scribbled my outline for the interview. But instead of rereading it, I tore it out. I was done rehearsing their expectations. I opened a fresh page. This time I wrote down everything they didn't know I'd kept. Dates, details, duplicates. I wasn't going to post anything online, not yet. Let Carleen enjoy her show. Let the world applaud her made-up compassion. I didn't need to shout in a comment thread. I had a bigger stage. By the time the plane landed in Atlanta, the sun was already breaking over the skyline, washing the glass terminals in amber. I exited the terminal alone, no one waiting for me, and that felt right. I had left behind more than a town. A rideshare took me straight to the Regional Scholarship Center, an angular modern building with clean lines, glass walls, and sharp air conditioning. I stepped out in slacks and a blazer I had picked up secondhand but steamed that morning until it looked new. My backpack felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying every version of me they'd tried to bury. At check-in, the receptionist gave me a once-over that lingered too long. I gave my name with a steady voice. As I waited near the candidate briefing room, a woman in a gray pantsuit approached. "Miss Clynn?" "Yes." She extended a hand. "I'm Ferris. We've received some conflicting communications. Are you here to confirm or clarify?" I smiled faintly. "Both." She led me through a hallway into a smaller, quieter conference room. I took a seat, opened my laptop, and placed a single flash drive on the table. "Before I answer anything," I said, "I need you to see this." The room dimmed slightly as the screen lit up. I navigated to a folder labeled with my name. Inside, a PDF scan of my travel itinerary, replacement passport, and a statement with evidence logs. Then I opened the email forgery data, highlighted headers, falsified timestamps, and the server it was sent from. Miss Ferris glanced at the documentation, lips tightening. "I also have this," I added, clicking a second file. A still frame appeared. Carleen's face caught mid-motion, captured by a camera Nevia had set near my bedroom hallway. Timestamp: the night my original passport vanished. But I wasn't done. "This is audio, recorded at our church group's rehearsal space," I said. "Legal in Missouri with single-party consent." Her eyes narrowed. "Play it." Carleen's voice came through the speakers. Clear, cold. "If she gets this scholarship, no one's going to care about me anymore." A pause. "You know how people are. She gets out, I become the nobody sister. I'm not going to let that happen." I stopped the audio. Miss Ferris stared at the paused waveform. "I didn't come here to win sympathy," I said. "I came to make sure my silence didn't become complicity." She didn't say much then, just nodded, asked for the flash drive, and said she'd pass it to the final board. "You're scheduled for 10:30, she said, her voice softer. "We'll see you then." The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I delivered my formal presentation, focused on my proposed community health policy initiative. My voice didn't shake. I didn't over-explain. I answered each question with clarity I'd fought hard for, and when it was over, I walked out without looking back. Hours later, I sat in a cafe 3 blocks from the center, nursing a lukewarm tea I hadn't touched. My phone buzzed nonstop. The scholarship's official page had posted a statement: "Integrity matters, courage matters. Candidates who speak truth will always have a seat at our table." Navaya texted, "It's everywhere now. Even people from your high school are reposting it." Some are shocked. Most aren't. Another message followed. A link to a thread where users were dissecting the audio and video evidence, expressing support, calling Carlene out without me ever saying her name. A stranger commented, "She didn't drag her sister, she just stopped covering for her." I reread that line twice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about release. I leaned back in the cafe chair, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Then my phone lit up again. Mom calling. I stared at the screen. No message, just her name. I let it ring until it stopped. She didn't leave a voicemail. A moment later, a text appeared. "Can you please take it down? This is hurting our family." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The sun had barely cleared the trees outside the dorm window when I opened my laptop. The acceptance form was already queued up on the screen, blinking cursor at the bottom where my signature would go. I didn't hesitate. Click, submit, done. My phone buzzed almost immediately after. Another message from Mom, short, sharp. "You could have handled this privately." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. There was no acknowledgement of what they did, no apology, only the same performative concern, this time not for my safety or future, but for their image. I didn't respond. I wasn't angry. I just wasn't available anymore. Later that morning, while walking back from grabbing coffee near the edge of campus, I played her voicemail, the one I ignored the night before. Her voice cracked, but not in remorse. "I don't understand why you'd do this. You humiliated us. Your sister is hurting." There it was. Still no mention of me, of what I had been through, of what they'd done. I deleted the voicemail and kept walking. Back in the room, I sat on the bed and pulled out my journal. My pen scratched across the page. They never saw me, just the disruption I caused by existing. 2 knocks at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. A student staffer handed me a letter. Inside, a neatly folded envelope from the program's lead committee. They were offering a permanent spot, not just as a fellow, but as an ambassador for public leadership. I was invited to speak at the closing ceremony next month. No conditions, no apologies needed, just recognition, trust, truth. I texted Navia. They made it official. She replied with a string of clapping hands, then followed up. "Told you, the truth holds." I smiled. That afternoon, I received an email from a nonprofit I'd never heard of, Youth Mental Health Coalition out of Oregon. They were organizing a panel for students with lived experiences in family systems that silenced them. They wanted me to speak. Another email, this time from a high school sophomore in Ohio. "I watched your interview. I've never seen someone say out loud what I've only whispered in my head. Thank you." And a tweet, going viral slowly. "Because of it, Bambalina Cloen, I reported my uncle for stealing my identity to claim my FAFSA." I stared at it for a long moment. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a mirror, and people were finally seeing themselves in it. That night, I set up my phone on a stand, sat in front of the window, and hit record. My voice was quiet, but certain. If you've ever been told you were too loud, too proud, too ambitious, too difficult, hear this. They weren't protecting you. They were protecting the silence that allowed them to stay comfortable while you stayed small. I paused, letting the quiet speak. You don't owe them your light. You owe it to yourself to stop hiding it. I saved the video. I didn't send it to my family. They weren't the audience anymore. As I closed the laptop and curled under the thin university blanket, I felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness that wasn't fear. Peace that wasn't conditional. I used to wonder what it would take for them to finally see me. I don't anymore. I see myself, and she's not going anywhere. Looking back, I used to think that keeping the peace meant staying quiet. That love looked like sacrifice, and family meant shrinking so someone else could shine. But now I understand. Peace that costs you your voice isn't peace at all. It's erasure. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not your sister, not your parents, not a culture that teaches you to smile while you're slowly disappearing. Your truth matters, even if it shakes the room when you speak it. So if you're sitting in a place where your worth has been ignored or your ambition treated like betrayal, I want you to know, you are not alone. You never were. And it is not too late to reclaim your voice. Maybe you've gone your whole life putting everyone else first. But what if this chapter, right now, is the one where you finally choose you? Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like your voice was drowned out by people who were supposed to love you? What would you say if no one could interrupt you? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments. Or just tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't connect with you, I respect that too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in. I read every word you send my way. And hey, if you'd like more stories that speak the quiet truths out loud, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of voices rising, together. You deserve to be heard. And I'm so glad you're here.